researching your ancestors using the resources and records of the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland, otherwise known as PRONI. My name is Gillian Hunt, and I'm the Research Officer with the Ulster Historical Foundation. We are a not-for-profit educational charity which has been helping people find out more about their Irish and Scots-Irish ancestors since 1956. The Public Record Office of Northern Ireland was established in 1923 after the Partition of Ireland, and it opened to the public in 1924. The new building opened in 2011 in the Titanic Quarter of Belfast. One thing to be aware of with PRONI's records, although their legal remit is to be a national archives for the 6 counties that make up Northern Ireland, they have excellent records for the 3 border counties of Cavan, Monaghan and Donegal, which make up the historic province of Ulster, along with Northern Ireland, and they also have a lot of records for the south of Ireland, including estate papers from County Kerry, church records from across the south of Ireland for Methodist records, church records for Dublin, County Louth and so forth. So even if you're researching southern ancestors, PRONI can still be a really useful resource for you. Now, although this presentation is going to look at the records and resources available on PRONI's website, I just wanted to start by showing you some photographs of the 2 main public areas in the Public Record Office. This is the search and microfilm room, and this is where you would spend time looking through the electronic catalogue, identifying documents and ordering those documents out. And then at the back of the room is the microfilm area where the majority of church records can be accessed. Now I'm going to show you that electronic catalogue in a few moments, because there's a lot, if you're planning a research trip to PRONI, there's actually a lot of preparation that you can do searching the catalogue at home, so that you use your time in the archive as efficiently as possible looking at original documents. And those original documents are viewed in this secure reading room. This photograph only shows half of it. It seats about 70 people. And this is where you can actually examine original documents. And one of the joys of visiting an archive is to see a record or a document that has your ancestor's name on it, or even indeed a document that your ancestor signed or made their mark on, for example, a will or a lease. So this is PRONI's homepage, and I'm going to be taking you through some of the most important sections of it, but there is a wealth of information in this website, so it is well worth your time to explore it and dig through all the different links. We are going to start by looking at the Your Research section. And this contains lots of really useful resources in terms of guides and information leaflets. This section on geographical boundaries is really useful. One of the most important things to do with Irish family history research is to get to grips with the geography of Ireland and all those geographical units, townlands, parishes, baronies, poor law unions. So this is a particularly useful section for getting your head around the geography of the area. Now we're going to look at the information leaflets and then we'll take a look at the guide to PRONI records. But like I say, there's lots of other different sections to look at. So PRONI has produced over 50 information leaflets, and around 30 of those are specifically under the Family Tree series. I've just screenshotted a few of the information leaflets on this slide to give you an idea of what's available. But for those of you beginning your research or who want to find out about a particular source, these information leaflets are really good introductions for you. And then there's a range of guides to the PRONI records. So for example, PRONI has produced a list of school records organised by parish that they hold. And we're going to take a look at one of the most important resources that is available on PRONI's website, which is their guide to church records. So the church records that are held in Proney are not online, they're in the archive, but this guide covers a lot of information in terms of what records are available, the time period they cover, the type of church record. And this is organised by parish and by denomination. Now, it's 374 pages in length, so you maybe don't want to print it out, but you can certainly download it or read it on the website. So just to give you an example, this is just some of the Dublin church records that are held in Proney, just going back to my earlier point that even those of you who have ancestors outside of Northern Ireland, this can still be an important resource. So you can see in this particular slide, Proney holds Congregational records, Methodist records, Moravian, Presbyterian, and this is just a few of the Dublin church records. And you can see the level of detail tells you the dates of baptism that they hold, marriage, burial, any other kinds of church administrative records. And then you have the reference number if you are visiting Proney or you'd like someone to look at that for you. And then if the church records are held in a different archive or in local custody, that's also listed within this guide. Now, going back to Proney's homepage, we're now going to take a look at the digitised records that Proney have put on their website, and that's under this section here, Search Archives Online. And Proney have added quite a few major sources onto their website, and this is a free website, so all of these resources that I'm showing you, all of these records I'm showing you today are free for you to access. Now, I'm only going to be able to show you a few in this introductory session, so do explore those other ones that I'll not have time to cover. One of the major sources that they have worked on is the will calendars, and these date from 1858, when wills were probated by the state, up to 1965, and the Proney have actually indexed and transcribed will calendars up to the 1980s, so they will be added to this database in the near future. So it's a very straightforward search facility. You can put in the surname, the first name. You can narrow it down by year of death if you need to, but you don't need to fill in all these different fields. One thing I would highlight is the full abstract box. If you think your ancestor was perhaps an executor of a will rather than someone who made a will, if you put their name in the full abstract, it will bring up results. And you can also put in a place name, say a townland or a street, in that box, which is particularly useful if your ancestors have a surname that perhaps can be spelt many different ways. And then you get a list of results. For example, I was looking for McGoldrick in this particular example. And if you note that column, there are some with no images and there are others that have that little image button. So we'll look at that in more depth now. So this is the will calendar for entry for Annie McGoldrick, who died in Belfast in 1950. So we have some important information, her address, the date she died, the two executors, the amount of her effects. But her original will is in Proney, and you would need to visit that or commission someone to get a copy of that for you. But if we look at another entry, Andrew McGoldrick, who dies in 1892, same sort of information in his entry of his will calendar, but we have this image button. And if you click on that on the website, it brings up this lovely scan of a copy of his will. Now, sadly, the wills before 1900 were destroyed in the fire in the Four Courts building in the Public Record Office in Dublin in 1922. So Andrew's original will unfortunately was destroyed, but luckily for us, clerks copied out each will before the original was sent to Dublin into copy will books in the local offices, and it's this that we have and we can access. So although it's not in our ancestor's hand, it's not in Andrew's hand, it is word for word what was in his will, and this is a fantastic resource for those of you searching for wills in the north of Ireland from 1858 to the early 1900s. And then if we look at the database of name search, this is particularly useful for those of you who are searching for ancestors in the 1700s. Now again, unfortunately, these original records were destroyed in that 1922 fire, so we just have fragments that came from a genealogist who was working out of the Public Record Office before the fire, and he had transcribed some of these records for searches that he was doing. So they only cover some areas, they're not a full listing, but they can still help you if you're maybe not sure where your ancestors came from, because it will give you an idea of where a particular surname was in that period. So for example, if we were looking for Adairs in the 1700s, searching this database, you can see that there are a number of entries for Donegal, which is in County Antrim. So that would give you a guidance that that's maybe an area you'd perhaps like to do some more research into. Now, if you are looking for the pre-1800 period, we would highly recommend this book, Researching Ulster Ancestors, by our research director, Dr. William Rowston. And William has put together this book because the pre-1800 period researching can be more challenging. There are less records online. Some of the major sources that we would use in the 1800s and early 1900s don't exist for the earlier period. So William has listed all the sources that you can use, how to access them, and he has also created a list of all the surviving pre-1800 church records and pre-1800 landed estate papers for every parish in the 9 counties of Ulster, with all the archival reference numbers. So it's a real shortcut for your research if this is the period that you're interested in, and you can buy that from our online bookstore, booksisland.org.uk. Now, returning to Prony's databases, the street directories can be a very useful source, particularly if your ancestors lived in Belfast. So street directories began to appear in Ireland in the early 1800s. They were printed sporadically, and then by the mid-1800s, with the Belfast and Province of Ulster Directory, that was published every year. So for those living in Belfast, it was a list of all the householders, organised by street address. So it's pretty comprehensive for Belfast. For towns and villages and countryside, the directory recorded people who had a trade or business or who were substantial farmers. So it's not a full listing of people outside of Belfast. But nonetheless, it can be really useful in terms of providing information about what life was like for your ancestors. What were the services, the businesses that were available to your ancestors in the nearest town or village? So these have all been digitised and are available on Prony's website, and it's a searchable database, so you can put in a name that you're looking for. So for example, I was searching John Hunt, and you can see it pulls all the Johns and all the Hunts, and you're looking for an entry that has both those words highlighted. And particularly for those whose ancestors were perhaps living in Belfast for a time, there's been a lot of redevelopment in Belfast. A number of streets are no longer in existence, and it can be hard to figure out if you find a street on a marriage certificate or a death certificate or a census, where was that street if it's not available anymore. It's no longer in existence. So the great thing about the street directories is they list where the streets ran between. So even if the street no longer exists, at least you'll have a sense that it ran between these two roads, and you'll be able to figure out what part of the city your ancestor was living in. And in the late 1800s, early 1900s, people moved around Belfast quite frequently, so the street directories are great for trying to track them through the years. And then we have the valuation revision books, and this digitisation project was a joint project between the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and Prony. So these valuation revision books come after Griffiths valuation, so they're from the 1860s up to the 1920s, in some cases even the 1930s. And they are all available for the 6 counties of Northern Ireland online on Prony's website. You search by place, so a street or a townland. You get a list of results, and then you can click into the actual books. Now, I talk more about the valuation revision books in one of my other sessions on valuation records that you may want to listen to. And then finally, I want to highlight the e-catalogue, Prony's electronic catalogue. And this is the list of all the documents that Prony holds. And you can search this catalogue online, which is fantastic if you're planning a research trip to Prony. You can do a lot of your preparation work before you come and arrive with your list of documents you want to examine. But for those of you who are not in a position to visit Prony, you can actually acquire a lot of information through this catalogue. Sometimes the description of the item can be very detailed. So again, it's a very straightforward way to search, and there are various ways that you can search this. One way, and this is only step one, is to put in the ancestor's name or the ancestor's surname. And sometimes you will get some results that relate to your ancestor. But the one thing I would emphasize with this kind of searching is our ancestors can appear in lots of documents in Prony. You can see Thomas Hugh Pritchard, you've 10 results. There will be many more documents in Prony that contain the name Thomas Hugh Pritchard. But if you think of an estate rental, a workhouse register, church baptismal register, school register, there are thousands of names in just one of those registers, and they have not all been extracted and put into this database. So in many cases, you need to identify a likely register or likely collection of records and then look through them yourself. So while this is a good step one, if you don't find any results searching this way, that does not mean there are not records relating to your ancestors in Prony. That's true of all archives. You can also search by place name, like a townland or a street, and a lot of records have been organised by townland, so that's another useful way to search the catalogue. If you perhaps have come across a reference from a genealogy guide, you can search the catalogue and drill down that way. So for example, D671 is the Prony reference number for the Downshire Estate Papers, but you cannot order out D671 because it's thousands of records. You need to drill down through that collection, through the catalogue, until you get to an item level, an individual item, individual document that you can then order out. So you can see here, for example, D671/L or leases, D671/R or rental, and when it's blue, that means there's more to drill down. So if we click into one of those, into the leases, if we drill down a little bit further, you can see they go grey, and that's you down to an individual item level. And when they're grey in the catalogue, that means that those are records that you can then order out when you're in Prony. Prony, a year or two ago, digitised their tithe records. Now, the tithe is a parish tax that was paid to the Church of Ireland, and a tithe valuation was carried out across the whole island of Ireland in the 1820s, 1830s. The National Archives of Ireland in Dublin have digitised their tithe books for the Republic, and Prony have now digitised theirs. So they're held under the reference FIN/5/A. And then each parish has its own unique number. And again, you can see these are grey, so we're down to item level. But in this case, in the right-hand column, there's a digital record. So if you click into that, you can download the whole tithe book for a parish. And then if you're looking for a particular townland, you get to that page, you can see the list of people who were renting land, the acreage of land, the rent they were paying in this particular example, and then the tithe, the tax they were going to have to pay. And this is a very important source because it dates from the pre-famine period, and it's now freely available through the Prony's website. Prony also has a YouTube channel, lots of talks on family and local history, well worth checking out. And just to finish off, the records Prony have put online are just a small selection of the records that they hold physically. And I just wanted to finish this presentation showing you a few. This is Fawn Charity School from County Fermanagh. There's a register there from 1787. Most of all school registers date from about 1850s, 1860s, so this is a particularly early example. Workhouse registers, not all of them will survive back to the 1840s, the famine period, but this one, Lurgan, County Armagh, does. Thousands and thousands of names in those. Grand jury presentment books date from the late 1700s. Again, these have absolutely tons of names within them. And then one of my favourite collections are the landed estate collections, and I have a separate talk on that you may want to check out, particularly the maps, which are absolutely beautiful. This one shows the outline of a townland with the individual farms that tenants were renting with the names of the tenants in it. So that finishes off this presentation. I want to thank you for listening. We would be delighted to help you find out more about your Irish and Scots-Irish ancestors, so please do check out our website or contact us for more information.